I don't know. Well, I knew it could happen. I just don't know anything about this part of it.
Super technology is super amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. We are live. Good morning, everybody. We are so glad you could join us for coffee and chat. If you don't have your coffee, get your coffee because it's really important. But I'm so happy this morning to have Khalif Ali join us. Khalif and I have been talking for a while now, kind of back and forth on the back end about what morning routine looks like. And some of us, I think, with COVID, got out of our morning routine. So before, when I worked in the film industry, I drove into the city every morning, and my morning routine was I dropped the kid off at daycare. I had a coffee, an iced coffee in the car. I listened to 93.7, the fans morning show, because I love Colin Dunlap and the whole team there, and would get my sports fix, or I'd listen to an audiobook in the car. And so that was like my hour to myself. And even though I was in Pittsburgh traffic all the time, I didn't really care because I had that moment to myself. And then COVID happened, and I don't have my drive anymore. Daycare is only about 4 minutes away, so I can't even drink my coffee in the amount of time that I drive to daycare. Sometimes I'll just sit in my car in the driveway and still try to recreate that morning routine. But I think for a lot of us, that routine was gone once once COVID happened, we kind of lost that routine. And so, Khalif, like, how did your morning routine change with COVID?
For me, it's been an evolutionary process. It's just like, as the years go by, you begin to determine what are the things that you need individually to start your day. So for me, morning routines are about like character development. Some people say self-development, personal development, all these different terms that we use, but for me, it's really about the internal work that I do every day to start my day. So uh, COVID, I mean, I was like everybody else. I just sort of lost my way. I lost the track of time, track of the days. All of those things sort of left me during COVID. But what I realized is that in letting go of that was probably one of my bigger assets that I just gave up on. And so after COVID, I really began to reestablish my morning routine, and also just add some things that I thought were relevant, considering the environment and the circumstances.
Yeah, I have to say, when COVID hit, daycare ended. I think for a lot of us that are parents, because you have a little one as well, you were just kind of trying to figure out, like, how do we make all of this kind of just happen? And so for the first few weeks, it was just kind of like we stayed in our pajamas, and it was kind of like nice because I'd never been able to be a stay-at-home mom as a single mom. So I took all the morning cuddles I could get. I took the late lunches and the late breakfast and the nap time snuggles and everything else. And after about 3 weeks, it was like I was doing laundry, and I was like, the only thing you've washed is, pajamas for the both of you. And so Braxton loves his pajamas too. So it worked out well, but it was like, we need to get some semblance of order back in. And so in my house, my mom was working from home. I was doing stuff from home. Braxton was home. The weather was still kind of crappy, so we really couldn't go outside. So we were just stuck in these four walls. Well, more than four
Mhm.
walls in our house. And finally, I realized that to help Braxton maintain semblance of, if he would go back to daycare or whatever else, I would get us both dressed before we ever walked down the steps in the morning. And it made a huge difference. And so it worked well for first few days. And then I, tried to do it another few days, and it worked out well that way. And so now, since he started going to daycare again, he gets completely changed and dressed, teeth brushed, everything before we even walk down the steps. We have a really great banister at the end of our stairs by the door. I set him on the banister, I put his shoes on, and I take him right out the door. So he has that's his morning routine. Because if I let him go into the house, he wants to have his breakfast, he wants to drink, he wants to play, he wants to touch, and it's just like we don't have time for that in the morning. We got to go. But now that I've gotten him into his routine, I try to make my day start at like 9 o'clock, which I
Mhm.
understand is also a privilege. But I come home, I, check my planner, I look at my calendar, I check my emails, I do kind of all of that. And I'm also fully dressed in the morning too. So even if I don't have anything, I'm not in yoga clothes anymore. I'm not in workout clothes. Like, I get fully dressed. And I've noticed that my productivity has completely skyrocketed because I don't feel as lazy. It's not like a day off anymore. And so I realized that for me, like if I do my hair but just put makeup on at home, even if I'm sitting at home, makes me feel like, well, I have to do something productive because I've spent the time getting ready. And I know that some people have really adapted like a morning workout. Some people have gone for walks. For a while, Braxton and I would do about a mile and a half in our neighborhood in the morning, and we loved it. We would see our neighbors out in the morning. And now, because he's off to school, I don't do that, which, maybe I should, but I haven't. So have you adapted a workout into your routine for the morning too?
Yeah, absolutely. So when my morning routine is um, in preparation for all of the day. Like even before. So I try to get up before my son and my daughter get up. So I usually get up somewhere between 5:30 and 6, which is ungodly for some people, but
Yeah.
it's my little space. It's my little slice of time in which I get to focus on me, in preparation for anything else that I have to deal with, or that I have to, or people and my son, and that I have to interact during the day. So when I wake up, I mean, the first thing I do. Oh, let me just say this one thing. Like your morning routine, I think you have to start with intention. Like unless you're just doing some type of rise, or you're just going through the motions, you have to declare your intentions for what you want out of what you're doing for that morning, for that moment, for that space. When I get up, I drink this big glass of water.
Mhm.
Number one, because I'm thirsty, and number two is just, it wakes me up a little bit actually, before I get to my coffee. And then I immediately go into some stretching. It's like I got this little routine I put together, sort of Pilates, yoga-ish type of thing combination. But it's not really a workout. It's more like a wake your body up type of scenario, that I go through. And I do a little breathing. It's not officially meditation. It's more like a transition breathing. Going to I immediately start talking about like what I'm grateful. I immediately go into some stretching. It's like I got this little routine I put together, sort of Pilates, yoga-ish type of thing combination. But it's not really a workout. It's more like wake your body up. It's a play. It wouldn't sound like a playback, but so then I do like this. I start journaling. I do a little gratitude work in journaling. So I don't want to start my day with anxiety, with you know, depression or sadness or anger or anything like that. So I just go with the things that I'm grateful for in that moment, in that space. Breathe again. I do a little reading, and for me, when people ask me about what I read, I read whatever is inspirational at that time, whatever I want to read. I read the Bible, I read the Quran, I read I Ching, I read, I read the daily bread. I read a number of different things. I don't really restrict myself to anything, and then I just take a moment to reflect on what I read. Like a lot of times we read things inspirational, and we'll say that's inspirational, but we need to have our own thoughts and our own process about what that means and how that applies to our life. So yeah, so I do a little bit of warm up, I would say body warm up in the morning, and then exercise is a little bit later in the day, when things are a little calmer.
I like to do like a workout like midday. So I have always had like a midday slump around like 3 o'clock. And so that's usually when I want like a second cup of coffee, or I want to
Hmm.
stretch, or I want to do something. And I found if I can get like yoga in or a walk or something else around that time, that my energy kind of catapults for the rest of the day. But one of the things that you said, I really want to go back and highlight the intentionality of journaling, whether it's gratitude or your thoughts. And since I've started this self care journey, I have realized that journaling um, has become really, really powerful for me. And whether that's like putting notes into my phone or physically writing, I have actually really terrible handwriting. So most of the time I can't read what I write. So in turn, what I have found is I like planners. So I have a
Hmm.
planner that is like my catch all that I just kind of throw everything into. And then I have like a quote unquote nice planner that's almost like kind of like a scrapbook and notes and achievements and goals and kind of journaling a little bit that way. And I've gotten into the stickers and everything else. And a year ago, I would have laughed at 100%, like, oh, that's just a waste of money. but I find so much joy and comfort, and then being able to have a little bit of creativity, because I'm creative, but I'm not always an artist. So just being able to map things out and look, and then go back and
Yes.
like, what did I achieve? So the other planner is kind of like what happened. So there's not like, if there were missed meetings, they're not on there. So it's really just a recap of it. And so as I move forward in this business model, I can go back next year and look back and say, look where you were last year. You did only 3 meetings
Right.
around these things, and now you're at 15 meetings, or you're at this level, or you're that level. And so I think it's a really great way to gauge. I put little anecdotes about Braxton in there, anecdotes about myself. I did a planner the first year he was born, and I went back in and I found that, like, I wrote little notes, like almost like a diary, like the day he lost his first tooth, or the first
Oh,
steps,
that's
or
great.
whatever else. And so that planner's still on my shelf because it's kind of like a diary. But the gratitude piece, I think that ties into that journaling and that planning, and about gratitude, like what are we thankful for. And someone posted today, and I just shared it on my self-care senorita Instagram, about like Monday morning intentions. Like there's always things that could be wrong, but there's so many things that are right. And so we need to start Monday off with that. And I often talk about like Monday motivation, about how, like, if you start this day with, like, oh, not Mondays, but like, yes, like Monday, like this is a new week. There's new intentions, there's new goals, there's new objectives, there's new ways to process forward. I used to have difficulty if I set a goal on Monday, and by like Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, I was kind of off kilter, that it was just like, oh, well, whatever, that's done. This opportunity is done for this week. And I had to reframe my mind that it's okay to like do a midday, a midweek kind of like hump day check-in of like, okay, so this is what your goal was and you're not there, but how can you adjust it to work closer to that goal? And I think for a lot of us, we our self-doubt sneaks into us, but also we set these standards and you're like, oh, I didn't achieve it, so like whatever. Like, say your goal was to drink so many ounces of water every day. Well, you missed it the first day, you're like, so, well, I won't do it the rest of the week. Well, why not? Like tomorrow you might kill it by drinking all your water, you might kill it by working out or sleeping or whatever else. So I think even not being so harsh on ourselves when we set the intentions for our day,
I
that
agree. I
their
agree.
intentions and their goals, but just like with anything in life, like sometimes we achieve them and sometimes we don't.
Right. And that's how, I end my day by writing down three things that I consider to have gone well that day. You know, so no matter how your day went, you have to, I push myself to find three bright spots in my day. And so that when I end my day, I'm not focused on any of the bad things, because we have a tendency to highlight one bad thing that happens during the day. We say, oh, our day's ruined, it's over, I had a horrible day. But for me, I have to kind of push through that negative moment or moments, and find three three situations or three incidents, however small they may be, and say, okay, these were successes for today, and I'm going to end my day with these successes. Um, but I think the power of a journal, I think, is so understated. Like I do, I've tried so many journals. So what I do is I do the bullet journal. So I do that whole format there, and at the end of the day, I just review my day, and I tend to put things that I do. I'll jot little notes about things that I'm doing. Like I'll put conversation with Tori, coffee conversation with Tori, and I'll jot some notes under there about how I felt about the conversation. And at the end of your day, you should just review your day. What are the things that happened? How could things have gone better? And what are the three bright spots about your day? I think are essential parts of your day.
And that's what I do with my planner, is I go back and it's like, wow, like you did 3 webinars and 2 conversations and
Mm-hmm.
built social media, and days that I feel like, oh, I didn't get a lot accomplished. I go back and I see it. And I'm also kind of type A. So I like being able to cross things off on my planner that they're done, or like highlight them. I was that girl in college that had the colored pens that matched the folder that matched the notebook. And so like English was
Right.
purple and math was blue, and that color coding system worked for me, and it helped me kind of keep organized. And I know some people are not like that at all, but it really well worked well for me. One of the other things that I found that I really love is in the mornings, if I have some time, I have this really great front yard and a really great front porch. And so I'll come and sit outside and enjoy my coffee kind of in the sunshine. But days that I feel anxious, like I start off anxious, I take my shoes off and I just kind of walk around my front yard and I really just ground myself. Like I feel the earth below my feet. I take the energy in, I say my prayers, I say my meditations, I set my intentions, and it's just like, I'm anxious, God, like I hope you take this away from me, but also like to the earth, like I'm taking your energy and I'm giving you my nervous energy that might help you, and in turn you're giving me back your calming energy. I fill my diffuser every morning with my essential oils. So I'm a really big practitioner of kind of the natural lifestyle. So essential oils go into my diffuser, in my living room and then into my office every morning. I do like a refresh one that I've made, or like a citrus for that kind of like, uplift. I make my coffee, I have breakfast, and then, probably around like 12 is when I kind of like come back downstairs. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have a snack, or I'm gonna do this. One of the things I did find with my morning routine is if I try to do too much, like, oh, I'm gonna throw a load in the wash and then I'm
Right.
going to sit down and do this and do this. I think about, oh, well, I have a second. Let me go downstairs and let me get the wash out. Or, oh, I'm doing this. Like, let me do that. And so then I become too PC. So I have found if I schedule myself items to do at 9 and 10 o'clock in the morning, and at 11ish, have that free space, that's when I'll be like, oh, well, I'm going to get lunch. Let me put the laundry in. Let me, tidy up. Let me do this. And I give myself 10 to 15 minutes to do that, because when we're working at home, I think that idea of what is fluid, of what is working from home now, is, well, that means I'll meal prep, it means that I'll do this, it means I'll do laundry, or I'll play with the kids. And so even I think for some of us, just getting back into the idea of like 8 hours of work and not 8 hours of work and home and whatever in the same 8 hours, because then when the work day was over, it was like, well, I didn't get any work done. Well, that's because you spent half of your day doing housework, when you could do housework when those work hours are done. And that changes for everyone, and that's fluid for everyone too. But just even setting a standard for myself, like, you can do the dishes and do a load of laundry, and that's all you do during 9 to 4. And then after work, you get set and you do the other things that you need to do for home.
I noticed that I'll use myself as an example. One of the things that used to kill my productivity is like not knowing when my most productive times were,
Mhm.
or doing the tasks that were menial during my most productive hours. So when I'm strongest in the morning and in the late hours, and I would be doing email and laundry and things like that instead of tackling my more complex tasks. So in the morning, now that I know how my body functions, my mind functions, I have to tackle the most complex task in the morning while I'm at my peak. And then I go into my menial task. I get to the laundry, I get to the dishes, and I get to all the different things that I know I can do. It was also a way for me to kind of put off the complex tasks, is just to kind of
Right.
jump into my email. I got 100 emails. I got to answer these emails. So yeah, it was about really learning myself, and when I'm at my peak mentally. Same thing when we're working out. When am I more when's my body more responsive to the workout? And that's during the afternoons. Early to late afternoons is when my body's there. So it's really, that's why I try to tell people, like, don't take my routine, don't take Tori's routine. You got to learn what's best for you and your body. All of us are very unique, and we need to learn what's best for us and what's going to be able to help us start our day.
Absolutely. So there's this really great book that I read called The Creative Blueprint. And I read it when I was working in the film industry, because I worked with producers and filmmakers and, hip hop artists and whatever else. And, emails were going literally 24 hours a day.
Hmm.
And I was
Hmm.
someone that was like, listen, like I don't snap in until I have my coffee. Like you can't talk to me until 8:30 or 9 o'clock in the morning, because that's when I worked. So at 8:39, I was ready to go when my feet touched the ground. Well, that didn't work for our team, because they were up until 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning editing, because at night is when their creative piece snapped in. So, as a producer and an executive vice president, I'm trying to manage 15 schedules, and time isn't working because someone's like, well, I can't do any meetings before 11 o'clock. And it's like, well, my day's halfway done by that point. And so figuring out, everyone's creative
Yeah.
process. So I stumbled across this book, And it truly helped me understand that, 9 to 5 is out the window now. And that was before COVID, but 9 to 5 is out the window because our society doesn't function like that anymore. And so companies that are most successful are those that can adapt to when their workers are most apt to be able to work. And so oftentimes my mom wakes up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning and she's just up and she wishes her job could give her that opportunity to function even though she's working from home, because she's in the healthcare industry. She is 8:30 to 5, and those are the hours that she works, but she'd be able to get so much work done if she had the capability to tap in at 3 to 5, take a nap and get back up and do from whatever else. And so if you're looking for a great book to understand, especially if you work with teams, Carlos, I know you're on the call. For your team, it might be a really successful book, but it's called The Creative Blueprint. You can get it on Kindle. I don't get any money back from it, so I'm not selling you anything that I'm getting profit from, but it was a very simple book, and it kind of outlaid, time frames, and there's assessments in there so your team can take it to see when you're most productive. And so if you want like a really engaged kind of group team meeting or something like that, trying to find the time that everyone is most at their best. So 3 o'clock for me isn't going to work for a meeting at all. I'm tired. I want the day to end. I want to wrap up what I need to. And I'm thinking, okay, I have to get on the road. I have to get the kid. What am I going to make for dinner? So at 3 o'clock, my head is already in my processing out mind. But at 9 o'clock, my brain is like, okay, we have all this stuff to do. Let's plan it out. Let's map it out. And so even still within this new industry that I'm working with, understanding the entrepreneur sense. So like there's times where I'll stay up until 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning getting things done. And that extra hour, because I was creative and I wasn't going to sleep, has propelled me so that next day, what might have been 3 hours of work is really only an hour now. So I think it's just understanding your capacity, your capability. Very sadly, in our life, we have a lot of friends that are going through some hurt and pain. There's some sick family members and some other things. So being there to help them. And at night, you're still processing it. And so I haven't been able to really sleep, but I've gotten a ton of work done because I have that nervous or that creative energy going. And so instead of saying like, oh, I have to go to sleep by this time, I'm harnessing that energy in a different frame.
Yeah, I get that. And one thing I would say is when people ask me about productivity, I always ask about the first thing I ask about is what's your mornings like, and maybe getting up, or if there's a time crunch, maybe getting up a half an hour earlier. I know people. I know it's tough to get, especially during the shut-in. Everybody wants to, sleep in and be able to enjoy your bed for a little bit longer. But it's just essential for you to have some type of routine to start your day to sort of, and mine's changes all the time. Don't get me wrong. I don't necessarily have much rigidity in my morning routines. It's adaptable. Knowing what I need, knowing what my family needs, and being able to integrate that into my morning routine is an essential part of it. Like I used to do morning pages, which is, for those of us who don't know, Julia Cameron's, it's 3 pages front and back of just like a free flow of thought. And so the idea is almost meditative in a sense. You're supposed to clear the deck, clears the emotions, clears your thoughts out, prepares you for the day. You have a clean slate moving forward through the day. But after a while, it just didn't make sense for me to continue to do like 3 whole front and back pages of a notebook. It wasn't working out for me. So again, it's just like learning yourself, not being too rigid. I think I forgot, there's a book that I read. I think it's called Morning Routines, but it sort of talks about all these different routines of some of the most creative people that we know in the world. Maya Angelou would rent a hotel room, and go there for a number of days and bang out her books, so learning yourself and being able to create something that is beneficial to you, I think is great.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's funny we were having this conversation because Forbes just released a few articles on the power of morning routine. And one of them highlighted a person working in Taipei. And so because of business and them working in the market between the United States and Taipei or whatever, their day started at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And so the one man had said, he'd worked in American business for years, and then moving to Taipei, his day started at 3 or 4. So he was up at 2 and he was working. And by the time he was done, he was headed home during rush hour, and most people were headed into Taipei. And so he said, even when his position shifted, he would still go in at about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning to miss traffic. But he just found that that's when he was most productive because he didn't have interruptions. People weren't saying, hey, how you doing, in that morning coffee chat or whatever else. I worked in higher ed for 9 years. There were some days where like I couldn't get to my email till about 10 o'clock because students stopped in, my administrative assistant talked to me. You're walking the hall, you grab coffee, you do this, and you go to sit down and you're like, where's the day gone? It's 10 o'clock and I'm just now getting to my emails. Well, that's because your whole morning process couldn't happen because you started at the same time as everyone else. And working in a field and an industry where it was so person heavy, if a student stops to talk to you, you can't say, hey, I have 100 emails, I have to go, I have to answer them. You make yourself available. And so I found, if my workday started at 8:30, I would sometimes get there at 7:45, 8 o'clock before anyone else in the office did. I could at least get through 15 emails. And if kids started to come in then, I didn't feel so guilty or anxious that I had to hurry up and get back to my emails. It also helped me prep to know, did anything go down the night before, that if a student comes in, I'm already aware of a situation that's happened, or, we have a situation, this report needs done or whatever else. I can kind of mentally put that into my head. So even when I first wake up in the morning, I check my emails on my phone, which I know you're not supposed to. But I go through and like, even as I'm still kind of waking up, I get rid of like the promo garbage in my email. So when I do
Mm-hmm.
finally sit down, I'm not inundated with a bunch of like, oh, well, check this out or do this or whatever else. Some of those promos I like to keep around. I like it for the marketing look. I like to see, what competitors or other people are doing. And so some mornings I'm just like, I don't want to read you. And I just, delete it and move it out. So I know some people are really against like touching your phone in the morning or checking your email or doing, whatever else. I have a friend that does, about a 5-mile run in the morning, comes back, showers, has a cup of coffee, brushes his teeth, reads the Wall Street Journal, does everything else, and is like tapped in and ready to go into work by like 8:30. Sits at his desk and works from his desk from like 8:30 until lunchtime. Goes down into his basement, does an afternoon workout, takes the dog for a walk, grabs lunch, goes back to his office at home, and works until about 4 o'clock. And it's very regimented. And if there's something that comes into that schedule for him, he can't handle it well because he's so used to that regimen. So he would do a midday workout at work. So he would leave work, go to the gym, work out for an hour and a half, and then come back. And so when COVID happened, his gym closed, he was home. For 3 weeks, he was really actually depressed because his whole life was out of balance. The things that he had done that helped him maintain and give him his productivity, he's in sales. So he has to keep that high energy, that productivity, and that kind of mental balance. So he's finally snapped back into a different routine at home. But even so, he said that he's not nearly as productive or as great at sales as he was in the office. I told him he had to be kind to himself, that we're also in a pandemic. So sales are not, sales might not be there, not because you're not doing it, but because of other reasons. So we've talked about the morning routine. I also think it's important to talk about your evening routine. So one of the things that I do at night, just simply because I have a toddler, on Sundays in the afternoon, I get all of Braxton's clothes laid out for the week. So, his outfits, his socks, and like there's 5 outfits and then like a change outfit. And it sits on top of his dresser in a cupboard. So he can't touch it and knock it over. But in the mornings, it's so much easier. Or at night, I lay it out. So in the morning when I have to change him, it's literally right there. So I don't have to go through and search. And luckily, he's still young enough that he doesn't really get the option to say what he wants to wear or what he doesn't want to wear. But I do that for myself too. It's like, okay, I'm going to lay my clothes out. And I've just felt that not having to make that decision in the morning saves so much time. And so our evening routine is that we sit outside and play until it gets dark. We go in, he gets his tubby, and then he gets ready and knows his routine is ready for bed. I used to, because he had a hard time going to sleep for such a long time, I would end up falling asleep when he fell asleep. And now that bedtime's gotten easier, he's more exhausted. I'm finding that I have time for myself in the evenings. So I go back and I start to do work. And I'm like, wait, no, like sit down and watch Netflix, watch a
Right.
movie, read. And I find myself like pulling my laptop out. My mom said to me the other night, she's like, oh, I heard the TV on, like you haven't watched TV in forever. I was like, oh yeah, I watched a documentary, which I told you about, the American Princesses. I was like, it was really interesting. And she's like, oh great, I'm glad you relaxed. I was like, oh, I did work too. And she's like, no, that's not
Right.
how it's supposed to
Right.
work. So even having a shutdown routine during COVID. So when we're working from home, it's so easy to pick up our laptop and keep continuing the workday through. And so developing a shutdown routine is also important. So for our mental health and our separation between job and life is okay, at this time, I'm shutting my computer down, it's going down, and then setting a limit to when you answer your emails back. As I mentioned, in the film industry, I was answering emails until 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. I'd wake up and I start in the middle of the night and check my phone to see how many emails were urgent that I had to answer. And so I wasn't sleeping because I always felt like I had to be on. And then finally it came to a point where it was just like, listen, if it's after 10 o'clock at night, I can't answer you, which is crazy. Who's saying after 10 o'clock I can't answer work emails? So I've
Right.
got better with the self-care of after a certain time, that's just family time. If it's not a necessity, I'm not doing it because I need to spend that time with my family and cook and do whatever else. So do you have a shutdown routine, and do you have an evening routine?
Yeah. So let me go back to you talking about the opening email in the morning. I don't think there's any wrong way of doing things. Let me tell you why. Um, Again, it's all up to you. I can't do that because I'll go down the rabbit hole. You can do it because you know exactly what your limits are, and you're doing something very specific. So in the morning, I don't open that because I can't stop. Once I get in it, I'll start responding immediately. So if you know that that's going to be an issue, it's going to take you away from your morning routine, you probably don't want to do it. So I don't. So I have email on my phone. I took Facebook off and I took Instagram off. So now if I want to go on them, I have to open up my laptop. I have to go through the process of doing it. And so that slows my interaction with social media.
Mhm.
So there's that. For the evening routine, I usually stop my day when I review my day. So whenever I decide to open up my notebook and say, what have I done today? What were the highlights? What were the three success areas, and jot down any notes that I want, and I kind of like, so I'll have to-dos in there and I'll just move them over. If you know the bullet journal process, you know what I'm talking about. I'll move them over, I'll move them to the calendar. So so I try to end it there. I like to read before I go to bed. So my goal has been to at least a half an hour, ideally an hour before I go to bed, to try to shut down electronics. Doesn't always work, but that's the goal. So I try to spend some time before I go to bed reading. I usually put my son to sleep at a certain hour. Then that's my time. So yeah, it's more like opening the notebook, reviewing the day, you know, then shutting everything down with regard to work. After that, I might have a little snack before I go to bed, and then I'll start reading. But what I found lately is I've been watching some documentaries as well. Uh,
I
Before I
feel
go to
like that's, if you're going to watch something before bed, I feel like if you're learning, it's not as guilty,
Mhm,
right? Like, so for
mhm.
me, that's how I negate it. And as someone who's like a self-declared nerd, I love biographies, I love documentaries. I would probably stay in college nonstop if it was free. I would get like 100 degrees because I truly love the process of learning. So
Mhm,
so documentaries are really important to me. So I equivocate if I can't read, if I've watched a documentary, I've still learned, and so
mhm,
it's okay
mhm.
then. So I understand that piece with the electronics. One of the things that I did get that has helped me tremendously is for my glasses, I added the blue screen, like the blue screen lenses to it as well, and so they're my regular reading glasses. But I've noticed a tremendous difference with tension and headaches and the constant reading. So whether I was on my Kindle or a book or my computer or my phone, I felt that like I wasn't as exhausted and as fatigued, and my eyes weren't as tired and blurry because I've kind of saved myself from some of that blue light. And so like my son, like there's after a certain time, like there's no electronics that are on in our house. Maybe the TV, but it's like far enough away. And so it just kind of helps him. He has some sensory issues. So we always try to make like a nightly calm down routine. So, you know, a bath and reading and kind of like a snack and his milk and just snuggles and we talk and, you know, kind of set the tone of getting ready to go to bed. And setting that routine for him set it for me as well. So I'm not picking up my laptop most nights after I put him to bed. I will open my Kindle and read. I do love to read, you know, and so I either have an iPad or my Kindle next to my bed at all times so I can read something. Just because if I turn the light on, I always worry that if he sees it in my room, then that's his invitation that he gets to get up and come in. So I like huddle under the blankets in the dark. But yeah, I do agree. The reading before bed, I fall into a rabbit hole sometimes because I love to read and I read multiple books at once, that sometimes I really get into it. I'm like, oh, just another chapter. And next thing I know, it's 1 o'clock. And I'm like, oh, like I should go to sleep, but I really want to see how this next chapter ends. And so even then setting, like mindfulness, like you have to get up in the morning, like you need to go to sleep. Like last night it was like 1:30 and I'm like, you have a very early morning, go to sleep. But I was reading something that was so enticing that I just couldn't put it down. And I was like, I'll just, you know, I'll have my coffee, which by the way, I'm drinking bourbon pecan and it's delicious.
That sounds delicious, actually.
There's this really great market called White House Market in Ohio. And they have these amazing donuts that are literally worth the drive. But they also have their own roasting company there. And so I bought up a small pack of a few different flavors. So there's a blueberry one and then this maple pecan. I'm a fall lover. And so it gives me a little sense of fall. And the coffee is just so fantastic. I just make it in my French press and add just a tiny bit of cream. I know you drink yours black, but I added just a little bit of cream. And this is absolute heaven and delicious. Did you have just your plain black coffee today?
Yeah, I typically have, put a little bit of it's stevia. It's stevia and monk fruit mixed together, but it's a little, so I put just a little taste in it just to knock the bitterness off, depending on what type of coffee it is. Sometimes I can just drink it straight black, but if I got a little cheaper version of coffee right now, so I got to put a little bit of sweetener in it to knock the edge off.
Completely understandable. One of my friends shared her meh blend, like her like, oh, I guess I have to drink this because we're out of whatever, was like a cinnamon roll from Starbucks. And she was like, you know, when you're a coffee snob, some people be like, oh, that's really good. And you're just kind of like, eh. And then she like tagged me in it. And I was like, I understand. And so there's a company that I buy coffee from called Melaleuca, and it's like all natural and it's organic and it's fair traded. And it's a little bit pricier, but just the taste of it is just so much better. Like it doesn't need sugar. It doesn't need a lot of cream. There's not a bitterness. It's just absolutely just wonderful straight out. And so
Hmm.
I love being able to make that. And I told you I ran out of my Vietnamese pour over coffee, which to me was just absolutely heaven. So Copper Cow is the company that I shop from, and I actually ordered online. I was like, oh, we're just going to do the subscription. We'll get the month. We'll try it out, gift it to someone, because the stores that have it are too far away. So I can't even just like run to the store and pick it up. So I have to wait for it to be delivered. But my friend Kendall, her husband Eric, makes really fantastic pour over coffee. He's in the military. He's a trained officer and from West Point. So he researches everything to the point that you can't research anymore. So he like read a whole entire book on the art of coffee. And so they live in Fayetteville and we were down there. He's like, well, let me make you a cup of coffee. I'm like, all right, like whatever you have in the Keurig. And he's like, no. And he knows the right types of grounds and the right type of blends and coffee. And he made me a cup of coffee. And I swear I floated. Like it was so good. I like floated in the air. And I looked at her and I was like, you get this every morning? And she goes, yeah, before he goes to work, he makes me the pour over coffee. And when I wake up, it's here. And I was like, wow, like even if he does nothing else for you, like that in itself is an amazing gift. And so we were there for a few days, and every day he made me a cup of coffee. And then one night he made me a cup of coffee before we went to bed. And he's like, it has the caffeine in. It's like, I don't care. Like, I just want it. And so as we're getting ready to get on the road, he made me a big cup of it. And he's like, this should last you 2 days. It lasted the car ride. But I think about that pour over coffee all the time. And so oftentimes when I miss her and I miss them, I'm like, I'd really love that we could have a coffee date closer too. So I think coffee brings people together. I think, coffee or tea or whatever you choose. I was actually going to go this morning. There's a coffee shop in my area called Old Crow Coffee, and they make this amazing salted caramel iced coffee that I just love. I mean, it's salty and it's sweet and it's just everything that you want from it. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go and do that. And so I started to get on the road, and I was like, you know what? There's a better use of that 25 minutes of your time. Next time you do your coffee chat, get the coffee beforehand and then come home. So I just made the coffee at home, but that's like a treat for me. It's expensive. It's like $5 or $6 for a medium, but it's so worth it. And it's a small business, and it's just crafted with care right then and there. And so it's definitely worth it. So if you're in Beaver County or you're looking for somewhere close, Carlos, I know you're close by, definitely go to Old Crow. It's a small business, like I said, but their coffees, they have like, their special this month is like Kahlua cream. And so they do like a pour over and add Kahlua and something else. And that was amazing. So I'm always a fan of supporting, small coffee shops. I think they're important. I think they're like our version of like community centers now. I mean, how many coffee shops have you worked out of?
Say that again?
How many coffee shops have you worked out of?
Oh man, tons. I live in Hazelwood. There's one around the corner. It's not open now, of course. But I make it my business to go there and support that business because I live in a predominantly Black neighborhood where there's been some economic stress, and so any business that exists in this neighborhood, I try to support. The business I go to, we got to look gourmandine down here, so. And I'm a pastry guy, so I definitely support them. But
I have been there filming and got to see them. Well, I had the opportunity to see them make things from scratch. And when I say there was drool coming out of all of our mouths and we didn't realize it, like we were standing there just kind of like, oh my gosh. And if you're not familiar with La Gourmandine, really it is just top-notch French pastries. And like you take a bite of it, like their macaroons, like there's none better in the area. So I could not live as close as you do because I would like figure out a way to get, we have D'Angelo's Donuts in our area, and they've been around for.
Oh yeah, I know all D'Angelo's.
Yes, they've been around for decades. And when they were closed during COVID, we were so sad. And when I got the email that they opened that Friday morning at like 8:00, I packed up Braxton, we got in the car, we drove down the road and we got in line. And we pull up to the window, and the same guys worked there for years. And I frequented there quite frequently when I was pregnant. And he was like, we've missed you. And I was like, we've missed you. And so I ordered a dozen. We didn't need a dozen. I gifted them to neighbors and friends. And I said, this was a long line. And he goes, we had a line ready at 5 a.m. for us. And so even that joy that people were supporting small businesses. Arnold's Tea, I was there when Miss Verna owned it, and then when Claudie owned it. And that was really great because that was a community, that was definitely a community.
That's truly a community center. Yeah.
I mean, really a community center. The reason why you went there is because you hosted meetings there, you got great coffee, great tea, great food. The environment was nice, the place was nice. So it's just sad to see that, some of the institutions and the places that you work out of. I have nothing against Starbucks. I mean, I drink Starbucks too. I don't personally like to sit in Starbucks and work. I've only done it a handful of times. The environment feels very sterile to me. It's always cold in there. I'm always freezing. It's kind of busy. I can't zone in. For my own aesthetic, like that metal kind of look doesn't work for me. So like hardwood floors and like an environment that's warm and comforting works for me. And so just finding other shops like that around here. In Beaver County, we don't have a ton of small coffee shops. If you do, it's like kind of like a walk-in. There's none that have like an outdoor seating area or whatever else. But like I'd go to Panera or I'd go to Arnold's Tea or Dobra and Squirrel Hill is a really great tea house.
Oh yeah. I'm close to those. So those are really important for me as well. But I think what you're saying is essential because we've kind of lost those essential institutions that were places where we came to gather and talk and kind of, shoot the, like Carlos would know, back when I had hair, the barbershops used to be that spot for us, you go in there, guys would be talking stuff, but they would be talking politics. I mean, we were solving world issues in a barbershop at one point.
I mean, especially for the Black community, that was hallowed ground and still is hallowed ground.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that because we've moved into such a commercialized society with like big businesses and things like that, we've lost that sense of like small ownership. So like Arnold's Tea, like I felt like I had ownership of it. Like that was my space. So if someone was in there and they left, dirty things on a table, I would go over and clean it off because it was like, this is my coffee shop.
Right.
Like leave it messy like this, or someone would be kind of harumphed because their food was taking so long, and so you'd have to remind them like, well, they're making everything from scratch. Like your tea's not in a dispenser and that's been shipped across the country. Like it's being hand poured and crafted. Like you can wait the extra few minutes. And so finding those community centers and those hubs that one of the things I loved about Arnold's is you never know who was walking in. Damon Young, who's an acclaimed writer, would be sitting down writing what now is his book, and you're saying, hey Damon, how are you? Having a cup of coffee or sitting and chatting, and you have no idea that while he's sitting in there, he's writing a New York Times bestseller. Or you see Mrs. Younger, who's a community activist, who's sitting out with her stuff spread out all over the table, and you're like, well, what are you doing? And then you realize that she's literally creating plans for the community. And so to understand the inner workings and why coffee is important, but also why coffee shops are really community agents and not just businesses. I think that there needs to be some really dedicated support for that, because I miss going to coffee shops. I miss sitting, out there and having a cup and enjoying kind of the environment that comes with it and the energy that comes from other people. It's people meeting, it's people talking, it's people learning, it's people working. And I tease people all the time. I have a huge front yard and huge backyard. I'll set up chairs. Like, let's create a social distance coffee shop out here. I'll bring the Keurig outside and the French press, and we could sit outside and like socially distance and work. We have a little teeny tiny pool. You can come over and put your feet in when you get too hot. We have a slip and slide. You can kind of come and go down the slip and slide. But I miss that shared energy that comes from being able to see people, whether it's in an office or a coffee shop. Talk to someone and you have a shared idea, and then that catapults a creative process. That's what I most miss now.
I see Gabrielle said that we can do it at public parks too. Yeah, we can. We can do it anywhere. If when you go into a store, you go places, it's merely transactional, then you don't have the means to kind of develop community, which is essential when we're talking about practicing democracy, right? Mm-hmm. So when like Claudia's space, it was ideal because so many people were able to, people were drinking coffee and eating food because, Claudia did it up. But I mean, people were really in there having conversations and really got, and people coming in and people waving to each other. That's like, for me, that was a throwback situation. I haven't seen that in many, many ages where it's just such a warm environment for people to interact.
It was just so special. It didn't matter if you were a first-time customer or had been there since the first day, that you felt like it was home. And so when Miss Verna owned it, she was with me through my whole pregnancy, and I hadn't told anyone. And I was sitting there working them one day, and she brought over tea and toast. And I said, well, what's this for, Miss Verna? She goes, you haven't eaten all day. And I was like, oh, I just really don't feel good. And she goes, yeah, because you're pregnant. She goes, I've seen this before. But called me out, not in front of everybody, like called me out, and very much mama loved me. And so my whole pregnancy, there was a lot of things, like I had food aversion. There was a lot of things that I just couldn't eat. And so she would make me toast, and she had ordered this special ginger tea, and she would make it for me. Even if I ordered coffee, she'd still go over and make me the ginger tea and give me that first, just like a typical mom. But the minute I had Braxton and was able to bring him in, we brought him in, and she was like, you're meant to be here. And so he was really little. There's this great picture of him like sitting on that leather couch, kind of propped up. And he looked like he absolutely belonged there, which he did, because he had lived and been in that space. That energy was part of his primordial being, right? So he connected to that space. And I think that that's one of the things that's missing for so many of us, is that we're just not connected anymore. Like Starbucks can come and go, people are coming and going, but those corner, even the corner stores, like just being able to know, you walk into someone and, a corner store or a local place. We have it, Do It Best, which is like a home and garden center nearby here. So that's where I buy my plants from. And so just, I can't say enough that shopping small, shopping local makes a huge difference for your community, but it also creates the community. And I know some people don't like that tie. They don't want to have, they want to go in and out. They don't want to have conversations. They don't want to see people they know. I think COVID taught us that those human interactions are important to us.
We have a whole generation that grew up without those type of institutions. So it's absolutely necessary for us to begin inviting multiple generations of people into these spaces so that they can become accustomed, because we can't have, generations after us who get used to the fact that we don't have these great institutions, gathering spaces in our communities anymore, because we have to be intentional about developing them and building them and inviting people into those spaces. But like you said, there's so many people who are not used to gathering together in spaces like that, or meeting people, speaking to people, or people speaking to them when they walk in the door. So I mean, I think we've kind of lost our way in that world of greeting and hospitality and welcoming and warming to people and making sure, like I feel like I'm the last generation. Carlos might be able to confirm this too. Like when you moved in the neighborhood, people used to knock on your door and say, "Hi, I live right down the street. Welcome. If you need anything, let me know. I can let you know where the stores are. I can let you know this and that. If we have, just imagine if we have more of that, people would feel more comfortable coming to these spaces. And I think it's just so essential. We don't have people greeting one another anymore in that way.
No, I live in a really wonderful little neighborhood and community, and very much safe. Braxton is the only child on the block. The next youngest she just graduated from high school. So we're talking a lot of retired people or people that are empty nesters. And so, nobody really greeted us when we moved in except our next door neighbor, George. And I think that was only because he was checking out who was living next door to him and not because he was interested in us. But, and we share like a yard. But during COVID, our neighborhood became so walkable. People were out with their dogs, they were walking, but we were outside all day. And so we got to know so many of our neighbors. So there's Rich who walks Crosby, and we wait for him at 5 o'clock every day. He turns the hill and Crosby comes running to our yard, and we get Crosby puppy hugs and kisses. And now he knows he gets a treat and he gets to play and belly rubs. And Rich went from standing in the middle of the street to standing at the end of the yard to now like sitting in the chair in the yard. And so we haven't seen them for a while, and we saw them yesterday, and he said, it's been too hot in the evenings. I'm walking him in the morning. We're like, well, we miss you. Like, we absolutely positively miss you. If you're walking in the morning, knock on the door so we can see you and the dog. And Braxton would go on bear hunts. So that was part of the thing they did with the kids during COVID. Like, please put a stuffed animal in your window so kids can go on bear hunts. So we would go on bear hunts in our neighborhood and find all the different bears. But we also got to know all the neighbor dogs. So there's Tug, and there's Luna, and there's Crosby, and then there's Chloe. And so, all the neighborhood with like the next like 3 blocks down and 2 blocks up, we might not know the people, but we definitely know their dogs. And so people know Braxton. And so he was playing the one day, and someone was walking by, and they're like, "Hi, Braxton, how are you?" And he went, "Hi." And I'm just like, I don't know who you are, but thank you for talking to my son. That I didn't realize that sense of community we were missing so much. Like, just even being able to know your neighbor, them stop and chat or say anything. There's a house going up for sale in the neighborhood, and it's bigger than what we have. And someone was like, "Hey, like, I know the owner. Like, if you're interested, like, let me know before they put the for sale sign up. Like, you can come in and check it out beforehand." I was like, "Oh, okay." And then during COVID, some of our neighbors were walking, and they would stop and talk to Braxton, and he'd show them his toys or whatever else. And, thank you so much. Like, he, is missing people. So just that sense of community from that, and knowing our neighbors' names and, who's across the street and talking, such a different sense of security that comes with where you live.
Right. I think that's all of that comes into play. Like I teach a class at the School of Social Work. I'll be teaching 2 classes in the fall. But I just before we start the regular curriculum, I like ask questions. Like, to know that there are people who live in an apartment building that has only 4 apartments and they don't know anybody else in the apartment building is it's not crazy to me, you know.
You're sharing walls with someone. You can hear their life story. You can hear when they go to the bathroom.
Everything you can hear a lot, yes, you know that, and so for me, it's just like getting people used to and comfortable with introducing yourself to someone who's new to the building, or if you're new to the building, introduce yourself. Hey, I just moved in downstairs. Just want to let you know, say my name. I'm Khalif Ali, blah blah blah. Um, if you need anything, come down and knock on the door. You know, it's
Yeah.
just like what are the things that we can do to reestablish the bonds or the threads that connects community. You know, even on an individual level.
My
And that goes back to my morning routine. By the way, that's part of my morning routine is checking myself about how I interact in the world. But go ahead.
Absolutely. My to that point, my grandmother has lived in the same home for 50 plus years. And so she knows all of her neighbors and they know her. And one of the neighbors 2 doors down, I mean, she happens to go to our church as well. But during COVID would drop like she dropped ice cream off the one day for my grandma. And we go to my grandmother's frequently to take care of her, but like not a stranger, but someone else doing something kind. So that neighbor works at Lowe's, so she dropped a flower off at her house the one day, and then she dropped off ice cream, and then she dropped off something else, and that like made my grandmother's day. That again, I think just taking care of our elders, right? Like not just family taking care of their elders, but that community sense of taking care of elders. So across the street we have Ginny, and then we have Marie, and they have a ton of kids and they take care of them. But the one day one of them was out there and leaning a little too far over the porch, and I'm like, hey, can I come and help you? She's like, no, I got it. And I was like, it makes me a little nervous. So I went over and, she was kind of like, I don't need your help or whatever. And her niece, like 2 days later, was like, thank you. Like she decided she wanted to trim the bush and she's 84. She shouldn't. But even just that sense of collective care, our car had gotten broken into, and it was a string of like, not just our neighborhood. They just they went up 65. They hit Baden, they hit Monaca, they hit Rochester. People just looking for quick money. And so they got my car, and it was really scary because I'm like, my son's here. Are we in a dangerous neighborhood? Whatever. We had talked to the police, and a few weeks later, the police followed up, and they're like, is there any other activity at your house? And how are you feeling? Well, my wallet had been stolen, and so like 6 months later, the cops call me again, and they're like, hey, we have your wallet. I'm like, what? They're like, your wallet turned up. Like someone brought it to the police station, and I was like, oh. So the guy came and he pulled up to the house and he put his little mask on and he came over, and Braxton was excited to see the police car. And he was like, here, he's like, I'm sure you've traded everything out and you've gotten things updated, but I just wanted you to have this in case there was something else in there that you needed. And I was like, thank you. Like I could have picked it up. And he was like, no, man, like it's our community action. And I was like, wow, like that was a positive interaction, not just with a police officer, but with my community agent as well. So, the community was small enough that he could drop it off. And so I think little things like that, I'm a huge fan of random acts of kindness. I think, dropping off a cup of coffee to someone, or if someone's done something and you're really proud of them. I have terrible handwriting, but I love sending personalized handwritten notes. And so people get them, and I make like 1 or 2 sentences. So it's big, so you can't tell how terrible my handwriting is. But I love the thought and care that goes into picking out the card, writing the card out, putting their address, putting a stamp. There's so much intentionality that goes into sending someone that card. Like I am showing you that I care about you because I've spent so much time, effort, and energy in sending this to you. And so I know when I get a card in the mail, it could just say like, hey, you're great, or like, hi, just checking on you. And it changes my outlook because I'm like, wow, like someone went through a lot of steps thinking of me and being intentional about me. So during COVID, Braxton colored cards and we sent them out to all the members of our church. So we sent out about 60 cards that were hand done by Braxton. He put stickers and there was crayons or whatever else. And we only got like 1 or 2 back in the mail, and that was fine. It wasn't that he was supposed to get him back. It was the fact that someone got a handwritten note, and maybe someone doesn't appreciate a toddler's crayon scribbled on it, but he had fun. And to know that he gave a little bit of himself to someone else. And so someone might have it on their fridge, or it could have given them a ray of sunshine that day. So, when I set my morning routine, I also set the idea of like, how are you going to impact 3 people in your life? So one of the things that I do is I go through my phone and I send a text message to 1 or 2 people to check in on them. how are you doing, or a follow up. I go through my Facebook messages like, hey, I forgot to follow up on this, or how's this, or send a message or make a comment or whatever else. And that's my way of being intentional with my relationships is, I know you just did something really fantastic and maybe no one acknowledges it, especially some moms and especially some of us that are single moms. Some days are just really, really hard. So when someone acknowledges that, like, getting the kid out the door dressed and ready and then you to work is really an Olympic gold medal, then they need to be awarded that. And I have a friend who's an Olympic gold medalist. And so I don't discount him on his medal because he worked really hard for it. But guess what? There's some mornings getting Braxton to school that feels like I just ran, like, the hurdles and everything else. So where's my medal for the day? And so we kind of joke about that. So I think your morning routine should be about intentionality and what you plan on accomplishing, but also how are you going to change the world that day? Whether it's with, like, legitimately a cup of coffee, or getting a note in the car, or Latifa Miller was on the chat earlier, and Latifa is like, I just swear, one of God's little angels. So for my birthday, we were talking on the phone like a day or two before that, and I said I was in line at Starbucks getting coffee, and then like 2 days later, I get a birthday card in the mail with a Starbucks gift card, and she's like, so you can have a little bit of joy in your day. She did not need to do that, and I even messaged her like, that made my whole entire week. Like, thank you so much. That was so unbelievably kind. And that was something that was extra on her behalf. But like, when I see that card and when I enjoy that cup of coffee, I do it knowing that she has sent me all of her positive energy through that day. And so I think you can send energy and manifest it and set your intentions and know that you're going to make a difference that day. Your whole outlook has a different process for that morning routine.
Yeah, I agree. Again, I don't think that there's any question whether or not I would have been able to adapt and adjust and be a better parent and a better person without some type of morning routine, especially during the pandemic. So it's been great. It's helped me structure my day. It helps me end my day during my evening routine, and allows me to rest a lot better because I don't have as much stress about situations as I usually do when I wake up and I'm tossing and turning and all these different things, and just try to release it before I lay my head down.
Well, and that's part of that self-care of being able to give yourself the time, like segmenting and compartmentalizing what you need to get done and at times that it needs to get done. So if you want to work midday between 5 and 8, that's fine. But what other parts of the day are you taking for yourself? If you're not that morning person, if you want to sleep in because you're up until 4 o'clock working, that's perfectly fine too. You still have a morning routine. It's just not the same time my morning starts. And I think that's important to let people know that you do not have to fall into the paradigm of that 9 to 5 morning routine at all. If it works for you, it works for you. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I have friends that are up at work and they've been essential workers. They're nurses and doctors or just, administrative workers. And they're up at 3 o'clock in the morning to be at work by 4 or 5. And they're working those long days. And, their mornings look completely different than what mine looks like. And that's okay. Talking about what you do for your day, I think with other people is also important. Like, I love that you journal. And even though I do that, I've not been intentional about it. Like, I journal when I have time to journal. And so I need to set that in as my morning thing of like when I'm setting and looking at my calendar, whatever else, just writing 3 things down, what I'm grateful for, what I want to work on. And then that practice grows. We often think when we pick up new habits that we have to master or be an expert of that habit when we first start instead of like kind of growing into it. So journaling and bullet journaling doesn't happen overnight. It grows, it manifests, it changes. Just like if you're a writer, you don't write a whole book in one sitting. I mean, you have to process characters and plots and everything else. And so I think, again, just setting that expectation of small steps, intentionality, and also giving yourself the grace to reinvent and look at yourself. I left higher ed because that was my 22-year-old dream and not my 30-year-old dream. And so it's what Tori wanted to do when she was 22, but not when she was 30. And so I left. And then at 33, I left the film industry because it wasn't that I didn't want to do it, but I was a mom and I needed to change what and how I was dedicating my time. So your dreams and your ambitions and your goals can change consistently. And that is okay as well. You know, if you've always wanted to be a writer and you're like, well, you know, I'm 45, it's never going to happen. Why not? You know, write a book, self-publish yourself, do whatever. But I think that we need to get out of this idea that once we set our mind on something, we can't pivot or adjust. And I think COVID has taught us about that idea of pivoting and being able to focus in on what it is and what it is that makes us happy and what it is that gives us fulfillment in our life.
I agree. The morning routine, whenever your morning routine is an opportunity for you to review. We all should have our goals written down somewhere so that we can review them and make it just. I literally have my goal, my vision statement / goals written in pencil, so that I can erase, I can adjust, and it still looks pretty neat. It's not all these scratches and everything. So yeah, I make adjustments all the time. I think when we allow, like you said, when you allow grace, when you allow the flexibility to change and pivot when necessary, when life calls on you to do that, it's less stress, and that's what it's really about. It's like not stressing yourself out about things that are beneficial for your life. It's kind of counterintuitive, right? You're stressing out about things that are supposed to build you up and get you and prepare you for life and open you up to new opportunities. So, don't be too rigid. Don't be too hard on yourself. Enjoy life, and just stay on purpose. Try to stay on purpose as much as possible.
I feel like that's a really great ending point to wrap up. And we are at our hour. I said 45 minutes, and you're right. You really are that interesting that we could keep talking. So I thank you for sharing your morning routine and your morning with us. When you're a thought leader, giving an hour of your time to someone else means that your time is moved from something else important. So I'm an appreciation of your time and your effort and your energy. And even just some of the comments that we've gotten so far where people have said, like, thank you for the space. I've learned so much. It is true. And it's some of the things that we sometimes don't think about because society has created us as people to go, go, go. And why we stop and evaluate, right? Like you shouldn't ask, just keep doing, keep achieving. But we can't achieve if we don't know what we're working towards. And so our morning routine really sets us for that standard. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
And until the next time, and I'll make sure I send you some of the Vietnamese pour over coffee so you can have some because I'm telling you, it's a game changer.
I believe it. I believe once you try a good coffee, you can't go back.
You really can't. McDonald's and Starbucks just doesn't have anything on good quality coffee anymore.
That's right.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you have a wonderful Monday and you've set your intentions for the week to be positive and life altering and changing for all of those around you. So see you guys later.
See you.